I grew up in rural Henry County on about 60 acres that had been owned by my family for 100 years. We had all the perks of living in the country. My mom was a stay-at-home mom. My dad is a retired Air Force veteran, and he spent nearly 40 years in the Air National Guard, the 180th National Guard base outside of Toledo. So when I was a kid, I didn't know much more than farming, because most of my family farms, and teaching or nursing or the Air Force. At one point in time, I met a lawyer. He was a senior partner of a small firm outside of Cincinnati. His partner needed a secretary. Said to me, "Why don't you come work at our firm?" And I went, and I learned a lot about the law. And eventually I started going to school at night at the University of Cincinnati. I worked at the law firm during the day, and carried a pretty rigorous academic load, but fell in love with law and the writing. And I think there I learned to think like a lawyer and analyze. I knew that I could do this. I could be a lawyer, and made my way eventually up to the University of Toledo just to check it out. I think there was a small part of me that always wanted to come back to Northwest Ohio to be closer to my family. My husband and I have 4 children. Our oldest is 10 and our youngest is 4. We're fortunate because my husband is at a point in his career where he can work from home more often than not. So a typical day in my house, might start earlier than you would assume. Sometime between 5 or 5:30, my husband and I get up as quietly as we can so that the kids don't wake. And before you know it, it's 7 o'clock, 7:30, and it's time to get the show going. It's a bit of a circus around our house. So by the time we actually get everyone dressed and fed and their lunch boxes packed, you're ready to go sit in a quiet office. Lawyering is not all about courtroom drama. A lot of what lawyers do is on paper. Between reading and writing, I really enjoyed the analysis in the law, and I enjoyed writing. I started working as a law clerk at the Court of Common Pleas 2 weeks after law school graduation. So during my lunch hours and on the weekends, I'd study as much as I possibly could. Took the bar exam in July and was sworn in later that year. So then I became a staff attorney. Interestingly, I promised the judge that I would stay for 2 years. And 11 years later, I'm still employed with him. One of my first assignments was a motion for summary judgment in a civil action. And I was handed the file, I was handed the motions, and and Judge Jensen said, "Write it up the way you think it should be." Now, for a first assignment out of law school, it was a little intimidating. I wasn't told what the answer was supposed to be, and it was good for me because it made me analyze the law. It made me look very closely at the briefs and find an answer. But it wasn't the judging that really inspired me. It was the law. And it was not about winning. It wasn't one side or the other. It wasn't the advocacy that we learned in law school. It was about being right, about finding the answer. The job evolved. The judge asked me if I was interested in doing some magistrate work in his courtroom. I started with ex parte hearings on civil stalking protection orders. Basically, I would have to make a determination, a credibility determination. Someone would come into the court and ask for protection because someone had threatened them. I learned a lot about courtroom and procedure. The court gives people an opportunity to tell their story. And that's a big part of every litigation, whether it's civil or criminal. Everyone has a story. And the court is obligated to listen. whether they have a lawyer on their side or they don't. Everyone that walks into the courtroom is treated the same, and they should be. I would describe my judicial philosophy as conservative in the sense that I put tremendous amount of reliance on judicial precedent. I strongly believe that the courts should not be legislating, that social policy should be set in the legislative branch. I believe that the most important thing for a trial judge to do is to make sure their procedure in their courtroom is sound, and that the lawyers who practice before you aren't surprised, that everyone has an opportunity to tell their story without the judge prejudging. You can take your gut instinct, but you have to do the research. You have to make sure that what you think is the answer is really the answer. Judicial races matter because judges are the pillar of our justice system. It has more to do with our daily lives than you would typically think. At some point in time, either you or someone you know is going to be impacted by the justice system. And I think the average person wants to know that the person in the robe on the other side of the bench, should they find themselves in a court of law, is going to understand them, is going to be able to hear them, and is willing to listen to them without any bias or prejudice. You can learn a lot about the people that you're putting into the position of judging by looking at their background, looking at who they are, what they believe in. I'm ready to make tough decisions. I've been working in the courts for more than 11 years. But justice isn't just about being tough. Justice is about doing the right thing. Judging requires an even temperament, experience, and a willingness to make really tough decisions. A good judge must be neutral, patient, and frankly, somewhat intuitive. My entire legal career, I've been trained to think, to analyze, to come to conclusions as a neutral. I've worked in the court system for more than 11 years. I've sat in chambers during ex parte hearings. I've written over 500 decisions. I presided over 300 hearings. I've worked on or touched every kind of case that could possibly become before the court. Criminal and civil, administrative, appellate work. I have a stake in this community because we're raising our children here. I want it to succeed. I want it to be safe. I want the justice system to be revered as just and fair. I want to be elected to this position because this is what I've trained for. This is what I've done for the last 11 years of my life. I'm ready. I'm more ready than anyone to step into this role.